Welcome back, comic lore lovers. Tonight, we explore a question that has haunted fans for decades. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the story carry you away. Imagine a city cloaked in the soft, hushed embrace of twilight, its towering structures dissolving into the indigo canvas of the sky. Here, amidst the quiet hum of an unsuspecting world, lived a man named Wade Wilson, not the regenerating degenerate you've come to know, but a ghost in the machine, a whisper in the wind, a shadow moving with lethal grace through the urban labyrinth. He was a mercenary of exceptional skill, his movements fluid and precise, honed by years of navigating the thin line between right and wrong, between life and death. His world was one of hushed contracts and dangerous liaisons, a dance of shadows where morality was a shifting mirage. There was a quiet intensity to him, a focused determination that preceded the chaotic humor that would one day define another path. This Wade, however, found solace not in chaos, but in the calculated execution of his craft, his senses acutely aware of every rustle, every distant siren, every breath of the city he moved through. He was a blade, sharp and silent, waiting to strike, yet still very much a man, breathing, feeling vulnerable beneath the surface of his hardened resolve. The air around him, even in the most perilous moments, carried a deceptive calm, a prelude to a storm that, in this telling, never truly arrived. This Wade Wilson possessed a sharp wit, a quick turn of phrase that often disarmed those who underestimated him. But it was a wit devoid of the relentless, self-aware meta-commentary that would later become his trademark. He was charming, yes, with a roguish glint in his eyes that could persuade or distract, a valuable asset in his line of work. His life was a series of morally ambiguous contracts, each job a tightrope walk over consequences, but he moved with a confident swagger, navigating the underbelly of society with a peculiar brand of honor. He might not always choose the right path, but he chose his path, often guided by an internal compass that skewed towards the less corrupt option. Even if it wasn't the heroic one, there were moments of quiet reflection, too, in the solitude of his sparse apartments, the hum of the city his only companion. And then there was Vanessa. She entered his world like a sudden, vibrant splash of color on a monochrome canvas, her presence a soft counterpoint to the hard edges of his existence. Their connection was immediate, palpable, a bond forming in the stolen glances, and shared laughter that cut through the tension of his dangerous life. She saw beyond the mercenary, past the guarded exterior, to the man beneath, a man capable of warmth, of deep affection, of a life beyond the shadows. Their budding relationship was a sanctuary, a fragile bloom in a world of concrete and steel, offering glimpses of a future Wade had never truly allowed himself to envision. He found himself slowing down, if only for a few precious hours, shedding the mantle of the hardened killer and simply being Wade. These were the moments he cherished, the quiet dinners, the late-night talks, the simple comfort of her presence. Yet, even in this nascent happiness, the specter of his dangerous profession loomed, an uninvited guest at the edges of his awareness. The shadows he danced with were long, and they had a way of reaching even into the brightest corners of his life. He was still a man of finite capabilities, of flesh and bone, susceptible to the dangers that Deadpool would later mock. Every scraped knee, every bruised rib, every near miss carried a weight, a quiet reminder of his mortality, a vulnerability that made his victories all the more poignant, his losses all the more crushing. This was the precipice of his life, a delicate balance between the love he was discovering and the harsh realities of his chosen path, unaware of the insidious whisper that was just beginning to stir within his very cells. A whisper that, in another reality, would scream and redefine him completely. But in this story, for now, that whisper remains just that, an unseen, unheard possibility, a path not yet taken. The rhythm of their shared life slowly began to define him more profoundly than the jagged edges of his work. Nights in his apartment, once silent and solitary save for the distant city hum, now held the soft murmur of conversation, the shared laughter over a playfully terrible movie, the quiet clinking of dishes as they cooked simple meals. Vanessa had a way of grounding him, her presence a gentle weight that tethered him to something real, something vulnerable. He'd find himself watching her as she moved about the small space, her movements fluid and unhurried, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. She never interrogated him about the day jobs, not directly, but her eyes held an understanding that transcended words, a knowing glint that saw past the bravado. It was in the way she'd bring him a warm mug of tea after he'd spent hours on a cold rooftop, or the way her hand would find his in the dark, a silent acknowledgement of the world he moved through and the man who returned from it. The city lights, a mosaic of distant blurs through the apartment window, often served as the backdrop to their quiet evenings. Sometimes they'd talk for hours, not about his work, but about shared dreams, silly memories, or the simplest observations of the world. Other times, they would simply exist in comfortable silence, the turning pages of a book, or the gentle crackle of an old record, the only sounds. Wade found these moments to be the purest form of peace he had ever known, a stillness that settled deep within his bones, dissolving the lingering tension from his day. He often wondered, in those quiet hours, what his life would have become if she hadn't stepped into it. A thought that always brought a shiver, a faint premonition of a loneliness he no longer recognized. Her laugh was a melody that could cut through any cynicism. Her touch a warmth that chased away the lingering chill of his more desolate memories. The quietude of the doctor's office felt like a stark, almost surgical incision into the familiar hum of the city, a silence that amplified the rhythmic pulse in his own ears. Wade sat, not with his usual restless energy, but with a surprising stillness, his gaze fixed on a framed landscape print that hung askew on the sterile white wall. The words, delivered with a soft gravity, were not unfamiliar to him. He'd heard them in countless action movies, whispered on hospital dramas. But this time, they were for him. Cancer, the word hung in the air. A heavy, uninvited guest that sought to shatter the delicate peace he had only recently begun to build. Later that evening, the familiar warmth of their small apartment felt different, imbued with a newfound fragility. The distant city lights, usually a comforting backdrop to their shared moments, now seemed to highlight the profound weight of the day's revelation. Vanessa listened, her hand gently tracing patterns on the back of his, her silence more eloquent than any words could be. There was no theatrical breakdown, no desperate plea, just a quiet understanding that flowed between them. He explained the options, the conventional paths, the long and arduous road ahead. Her gaze, steady and unwavering, met his, reflecting a strength that mirrored his own burgeoning determination. The subsequent weeks unfolded into a rhythm entirely alien to Wade's previous life of adrenaline and shadows. Hospital corridors replaced alleyways. The sterile scent of antiseptic supplanted the metallic tang of gunpowder. He became familiar with the quiet efficiency of nurses, the gentle prods of needles, and the monotonous whir of medical machines. These were not the thrilling skirmishes he was accustomed to. This was a war of attrition waged within his own body, with small, incremental victories and exhausting setbacks. There were moments of weariness, a dull ache that settled deep in his bones, but his sharp wit, though quieter, remained. He'd offer a dry, understated joke to a passing nurse, a fleeting smirk that hinted at the man beneath the patient gown. The long, quiet rhythm of treatment settled into Wade's life, an unfamiliar cadence replacing the quick, sharp beats of his former existence. There were days of profound stillness, where the world outside faded to a gentle hum, and his own body became the singular focus. Vanessa was a constant, her presence a soft, unwavering anchor in the shifting tides of uncertainty, her hand often finding his, a silent reassurance. He felt the subtle erosion of his physical strength. The edges of his usual boundless energy softened, but within, a different kind of resilience began to form. A deeper appreciation for the simple fact of breath, of touch, of the quiet hours spent with her. His mind, ever sharp, began to map out a future no longer defined by reckless abandon, but by careful, considered steps. Months later, the city's pulse called him back, not to the frantic pace he once knew, but a more measured tempo. Wade returned to his work, his movements precise, his tactical mind sharper, refined by the crucible of vulnerability. He moved through the urban shadows with a renewed sense of purpose, each contract now undertaken with a deeper understanding of the risks, the weight of every choice. There was no regenerative factor to shrug off a bullet or blade. Every graze, every close call lingered in his memory, a stark reminder of his very human fragility. His reputation, built on skill and cunning, only grew, adapting to this new, more careful methodology. He was an artist of infiltration and extraction, a ghost in the urban labyrinth, leaving only whispers in his wake, the quiet ache in his joints after a particularly demanding infiltration, the stiffness in his shoulders from a night spent in a precarious perch. These were the new companions to his successes. He learned to listen to his body, to respect its limits, a lesson he would never have absorbed in a life of invincibility. Sometimes, in the soft glow of their apartment, Vanessa would gently massage a tired muscle, her touch a tender reminder of the human cost of his chosen path. He was still Wade, still sharp-witted and capable, but the wild, untamed edges had been smoothed by experience, by the knowledge that he was irrevocably mortal. This awareness didn't diminish him, it refined him, sharpening his focus, deepening his connection to the fragile, precious life he now shared. The quiet hum of the Weapon X facility, usually a thrumming testament to relentless experimentation, now carried a distinct note of frustration. Without Wade's singular, volatile genetic makeup, the lead scientists found themselves repeatedly hitting insurmountable walls. Data screens flickered with inconclusive results. Failed matrices of cellular regeneration glowing dimly in the sterile darkness. The project, intended to forge an unstoppable living weapon, floundered. Other candidates, more conventional, yielded only meager, unstable enhancements, or succumbed entirely, their potential quickly extinguished. The brilliant, desperate minds behind the program grew weary, their ambition curdling into a quiet, simmering despair. The whispers of their initial success fading into the cold, calculated silence of repeated failure. This void forced the program to cast a wider, more desperate net. Less promising individuals Those with fragmented or weaker mutations were brought in, subjected to the same grueling processes, but with drastically different outcomes. One such subject, a man named Francis, once a minor enforcer with a less than stellar criminal record, underwent procedures that, in another timeline, would have given him formidable strength and a pain-ignoring resilience. Here, however, the enhancements were incomplete, leaving him with a grotesque, scarred physicality, but lacking the critical durability or accelerated healing factor. He was a shell, a testament to the program's compromised potential, a pale imitation of the powerful enforcer he was meant to become. A flicker of pain in the desolate hallways, the chill of the urban night clung to Wade as he moved, a ghost through the labyrinthine ducts of a secure data facility. Every muscle, honed through years of disciplined training, responded with a dancer's precision. He wasn't relying on accelerated healing or superhuman strength, but on sheer methodical skill. His fingers, calloused and steady, delicately bypassed laser grids, the faint hum of their dormant energy, barely a whisper against the thrum of his own pulse. A distant security camera's sweep was noted, its rhythm memorized, as he slipped through the blind spot. The metallic scent of dust and stale air filling his nostrils. The mission was a high-stakes data extraction, one that required absolute silence and a mind as sharp as his blade. A sudden, muffled clash echoed down a corridor he was about to enter, the distinct thud of a human body hitting concrete. His instincts, honed to a razor's edge, screamed danger. He shifted his plan, choosing an alternate, more hazardous route through a precarious service tunnel, ignoring the twinge in his knee from a previous jump. Peering through a grate, he saw a hulking figure in reinforced armor, not quite Francis, but reminiscent of the Weapon X program's early, less successful results. Patrolling, this opponent was slower, less refined, yet still formidable in sheer brute strength. Wade observed, his mind racing, dissecting weaknesses, planning an approach that wouldn't end in a devastating, unhealable injury. The engagement was swift, brutal, and utterly silent. Wade used the environment to his advantage. A falling stack of discarded machinery, a precise pressure point strike, and a well-placed, non-lethal sedative dart. The hulking enforcer crumpled, not dead, but deeply unconscious. Wade's own side throbbed where a glancing blow had landed, a sharp pain radiating through his ribs. He pressed a hand to the bruised area, wincing, but pushed past the discomfort. The data was acquired, a flash drive now secured in his pocket, its tiny light a silent testament to his success. Wade watched the hulking figure for several long minutes, allowing the dull throb in his knee to subside into a familiar ache. He couldn't risk a direct engagement. The sheer blunt force of such a foe, unenhanced by healing, would mean a broken bone or worse. Instead, he measured the distance to an overhead pipe, calculating the swing, the landing, the precarious balance. His breath was steady, but the slight tremor in his hand, a ghost from an old fracture, was a quiet reminder of his mortality. He launched himself, a controlled, silent arc through the shadowed space. The landing was softer than it should have been, a testament to his practiced technique. Yet a jolt still ran through his ankle, sending a sharp, familiar pain up his leg. He pressed himself against the cold metal of a ventilation shaft. The hum of the facility's unseen machinery vibrating through him. This path was tighter, dustier, the air thick with the faint, metallic scent of ozone from the servers he was approaching. As he maneuvered a sharp bend, his shoulder, previously dislocated in a job that went sideways, screamed in a dull, protesting ache. He paused, leaning against the duct, taking shallow breaths, waiting for the phantom echo of pain to subside before pushing on. Finally, he dropped silently into the server room, the monotonous drone of the machines, a low, constant lullaby. The air here was cooler, regulated, carrying the crisp scent of electricity. He moved directly to the target terminal, his fingers, scarred and calloused, quickly interfacing with the system. Each faint line on his knuckles, each subtle scar along his forearm, told a story of impact, of blade, of the unforgiving edges of his profession. The soft, bluish glow from the screen illuminated the faint, worry lines around his eyes, lines not of age, but of perpetual vigilance and hard-won experience. He began the data extraction. The quiet click of the keys, the only sound in his focused world. The dull ache in Wade's shoulder softened, a familiar companion rather than a searing protest. He pushed forward, a ghost in the metallic arteries of the facility. The ventilation shaft widened slightly, offering a fraction more space for his lean frame, though the air remained stale, tasting faintly of recycled ambition and forgotten dust. Through a wider grate, he could glimpse not the immediate server room, but a more expansive corridor below, bathed in a soft, flickering amber light from emergency indicators. The rhythmic thud of the hulking guards' footfalls, once distant, now resonated with a deeper bass, closer than before. He could discern the faint metallic sheen of its armor reflecting the emergency lights as it passed a junction. A slow, methodical sweep. He continued to watch the methodical patrol, analyzing the subtle hesitations in its movement, the slight drag in its right leg. An old injury, perhaps, or a design flaw in its heavy armature. This was not a mindless drone. It possessed a rudimentary, almost primal instinct for defense, making it unpredictable in a different way than a more refined opponent. The server room itself, when he finally shifted his position to get a clearer view through another, smaller vent, was cavernous and cold, filled with rows of humming machines. Data flowed through countless fiber optic strands, a silent, invisible river of information. His target was a specific data module, nestled deep within one of the racks. He pictured the faces of the people involved in this contract, the nervous financier, the shadowy intermediary. The time for observation was drawing to a close. Wade extended a hand, testing the integrity of the vent cover, ensuring it would detach with minimal sound. His fingers, calloused and strong, worked with a surgeon's precision. He had chosen this route not just for stealth, but because it minimized direct confrontation. His plan was to bypass the hulking guard entirely, slip in, extract the data, and slip out. There would be no unnecessary violence, no collateral damage to the facility beyond the temporary disabling of the module itself. The hum of the server room was a dull bass against the metallic whisper of Wade's gloves as he unlatched the grate. He lowered himself with careful precision, each movement a practiced economy of effort, a silent prayer against the creaks and groans of aged infrastructure. The cold air, once distant, now enveloped him, carrying the faint metallic tang of ozone and dust. His boots met the polished floor with the softness of a falling feather, the low light reflecting in the scuffed leather. He moved like a shadow, weaving between the towering racks of data, his eyes already locked onto the module he sought. A small, unassuming black box amidst the vast digital ocean. The targeted module glowed with a faint indicator light, a beacon in the digital labyrinth. Wade's fingers, scarred but steady, moved with the precision of a surgeon, disconnecting the fiber optic lines, bypassing the security protocols with a practiced ease. Each click and soft whir was amplified in the hushed silence of the room, a testament to his focused concentration. He paused, listening to the distant, rhythmic hum of the facility's deeper workings, a phantom echo that reminded him of the ever-present danger, the watchful eyes of automated systems, and the heavy footfalls of the hulking guard far below. Now a muffled rumble through layers of concrete and steel. This was not a moment for reckless abandon, but for meticulous execution, where every second counted and every movement bore weight. With the data module secured in a padded pouch at his hip, Wade retraced his steps, his movements just as fluid and silent as his entry. The silence of his departure was stark. No alarms blared. No chaotic explosions echoed through the facility. There was no need for a dramatic, improvisational escape, or a flurry of witty one-liners to distract and disorient. This was a clean, professional exfiltration, a testament to a life lived on the razor's edge without the safety net of rapid regeneration. The mission, critical and precise, concluded with minimal collateral, a quiet success in a world that might otherwise have seen a far more destructive and public intervention. Had a certain merc with a mouth been involved, having completed his extraction, Wade slipped out of the facility and into the cool embrace of the city's night. He walked for a long time, the rhythmic echo of his own footsteps a counterpoint to the distant hum of traffic. He found himself drawn to a quiet corner bar, its neon sign a faint, blurred halo in the soft drizzle. Inside, the low murmur of conversation was a comforting balm after the silent intensity of his mission. He took a seat at the far end of the counter, ordering a drink and letting his guard down just a fraction. From across the room, a familiar silhouette caught his eye. A man hunched over a laptop, tinkering with wires. A ghost of a different past. This was a man named Jack, who in another life might have been his quartermaster, but here was merely a stranger with a shared interest in electronics. Wade felt a peculiar tug, a sense of phantom familiarity for Jack. He wasn't exactly sure why, but something about the meticulous way Jack handled the delicate circuitry, the occasional frustrated sigh, resonated deeply within him, stirring a sense of camaraderie that had no basis in their shared present. He imagined a version of himself sharing a cheap joke with this man, perhaps a knowing glance over some shared, illicit gadgetry. But in this reality, Jack merely adjusted his glasses, completely oblivious to the silent observer, who felt a quiet echo of a friendship that never truly happened. Wade traced the rim of his glass. The cold condensation, a stark contrast to the warmth of the unspoken connection. Later, as the rain had softened to a persistent drizzle, Wade walked away from the bar, the city lights blurring into long, shimmering streaks on the wet pavement. The encounter with Jack had left him with a quiet, reflective mood. It wasn't sadness, exactly, but a profound awareness of the different paths lives could take, the myriad possibilities that branched out from a single decision. He wasn't the boisterous, scarred anti-hero of another reality, but a man carrying his wounds unseen, his victories hard-won and his friendships earned through genuine effort, not shared trauma. The wind, cool and gentle, whispered through the urban canyons, carrying with it the quiet understanding of a life less chaotic, but no less meaningful. Wade drained his glass, the last drop clinging to the rim before disappearing. He rose from the bar stool, the phantom familiarity of a friendship that never bloomed still, a quiet hum beneath his skin. The city outside, a soft wash of streetlights through the drizzle, beckoned him. He slipped out, the cool night air a refreshing contrast to the warm, murmuring interior. His footsteps once again taking up their solitary rhythm on the slick pavement. He found himself contemplating the paths taken and not taken, the quiet choices that had shaped his existence, each one a thread in the tapestry of a life lived without the fiery crucible of a forced transformation. His walk was unhurried, a gentle perambulation through the sleeping city. Rain beaded on his jacket, reflecting the diffused light from distant lampposts. He passed by a weathered, almost forgotten bulletin board affixed to a damp brick wall. Among the peeling flyers and faded notices, a crisp, official-looking poster stood out, depicting a stylized eagle over bold text that read, "Special Operations. Seek the unseen, become the edge." It was a recruitment call, subtle and discreet, for a program that hinted at much more than conventional military service. Wade glanced at it, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, a brief, silent acknowledgement of a world he skirted, a path he had deliberately swerved to avoid. Eventually, his path led him to a nondescript apartment building, its windows dark, and quiet save for a single warm glow on the third floor. This was his sanctuary, a quiet haven from the world's harsh demands. He let himself in with a soft click, the familiar scent of old paper and dust greeting him. Inside, his small apartment was sparsely furnished, but held a sense of quiet order. A single, well-worn leather-bound book lay open on a small table beside a half-empty teacup, a silent testament to a life lived in moments of calm solitude, far removed from the explosive chaos that might have otherwise defined him. The gentle hum of the city was now a distant, soothing lullaby. Wade's footsteps, once a solitary rhythm, now seemed to echo a deeper, more profound quiet through the sleeping city. The drizzle on his jacket felt less like rain and more like a gentle wash, cleansing the remnants of a life he might have lived, but hadn't. He paused by a window, the glass cool against his fingertips, watching the city lights blur into soft halos, each a tiny, distant heart beating in the vast urban expanse. The crucible he'd skirted, the fiery transformation that had forged another version of himself into a chattering, regenerating force of nature, was in this reality merely a shadow, an unchosen path that had never manifested. Here, his existence was a mosaic of conscious decisions, each small choice a thread woven into a tapestry of genuine vulnerability and hard-won resilience. Every scar, every ache, every deep-seated weariness in his muscles was a testament to a victory earned, not gifted, a vivid memory etched into his very being. He felt the phantom weight of old wounds, the subtle stiffness in his joints that would have been erased by a healing factor. Yet these were the very things that anchored him, reminded him of the precious, finite nature of his own skin. His humor, still quick and sharp, carried the undercurrent of a man who understood fragility, not mocked it, a deeper resonance that spoke of lived experience. There was a quiet dignity in this untouched existence, a silent strength born from the very absence of invincibility. He was a man made of moments, not endless resurrections. And in that, he found a unique, unassuming grace that permeated his every action, a profound sense of self. This quieter Wade Wilson had left a different imprint on the world, a subtle ripple rather than a crashing wave. The Weapon X program, perhaps stumbling without its most unpredictable subject, had likely chosen another, less resilient path, or perhaps faded into obscurity, its dark designs never fully blossoming without Wade's chaotic presence. Some corners of the criminal underworld might have found a different, more predictable equilibrium. Vanessa, in this reality, might have known a life free from the constant shadow of a partner teetering on the edge of death and madness, a companionship built on shared vulnerabilities and the delicate strength of two ordinary lives intertwined, their bond deepened by mutual reliance, their laughter, softer now, less manic, resonated with the gentle hum of normalcy, a precious gift. Wade's victories, hard-won and often leaving him physically diminished, were never forgotten, each one a sharp reminder of the cost of heroism without a cheat code. He had built his life on genuine connections and earned respect, not the bewildered tolerance granted to an unkillable anomaly. The echoes of a different future, where a red-suited maniac defied physics with a grin, were faint, almost imperceptible. This was a life of quiet impact, of battles fought with skill and grit, of a legacy built on the human truth of limited time and profound courage. A life authentically his own. It was a life, he knew, that carried a different kind of weight, a richer, more grounded resonance, felt in the slow, steady beat of his vulnerable heart. And so, this alternate saga settles into a calm, final breath, a gentle sigh carried on the night air. This Wade Wilson, untouched by the accelerating decay of cancer and the subsequent grotesque rebirth, was a testament to the myriad ways identity can be forged and refined. His choices, deliberate and deeply human, had painted a canvas vastly different from the chaotic, fourth-wall-breaking masterpiece of Deadpool. He was not defined by what he became, but by what he remained. A man, a mercenary, yes, but one whose heart beat with a fragile, mortal rhythm, valuing every precious second. The profound silence where the booming laughter and meta-commentary would have been, was instead filled with the quiet satisfaction of a life truly lived, every breath precious, every moment earned through sheer human effort. The enduring question, then, wasn't what powers he possessed, or what superhuman feats he could achieve, but what kind of person he had chosen to be, stripped of the grand theatrics of invincibility. He was a hero, perhaps, not of the sensational comic books, but of the quiet, untold stories that unfold in the gentle hum of everyday life, where the greatest strength is found not in never falling, but in rising, bruised but whole, time and again, holding onto his humanity. Let this thought gently linger as the city outside truly sleeps, its restless energy momentarily hushed, and the echoes of paths taken and paths gracefully swerved fade into the peaceful stillness of the night. Sleep well, knowing that sometimes the most profound power lies not in regeneration, but in the simple, unbroken strength of being merely courageously human in every vulnerable beat of the heart. The quiet hum of their apartment, a balm after the sharp edges of the day, wrapped around Wade and Vanessa. It was a comfortable quiet, woven from years of shared glances and unspoken understandings, a stark contrast to the cacophony he often navigated in the world beyond their door. His hand, calloused and scarred from countless skirmishes, idly traced the worn pattern on the armrest of his favorite old recliner. This chair, like him, bore the marks of a life lived, its leather softened by time and use, each scuff a memory. Vanessa sat beside him, not touching, but her presence, a gentle, grounding weight in the space, a silent understanding passing between them like the last rays of the setting sun through the window. A faint, familiar ache throbbed in his left shoulder, a persistent echo of a poorly set bone from a job years ago, a wound that never quite healed right, a testament to the limits of mortal flesh. Beyond the tranquil haven of their apartment, the world still called to Wade Wilson, not with the boisterous demands once associated with a mercenary, but with a hushed, almost reverent respect. His reputation was not built on unkillable resilience or a chaotic disregard for life and limb, but on cold, hard skill, tactical brilliance, and an unwavering, almost stubborn resolve. He was a ghost in the shadows, a whisper in the back alleys, known for emerging from impossible situations not unscathed, but victorious, each time a testament to his sheer, unadulterated grit. Governments and shadowy organizations, wary of the unpredictable and the superhuman, often sought him out for his grounded approach, valuing a mind that calculated risks with mortal precision over one that simply shrugged off fatal blows. He didn't take on assignments for the thrill of the impossible, but for the clarity of the challenge, the calculated dance between danger and deliverance. His targets were often the hidden gears of the criminal underworld, the meticulous architects of quiet terror, rather than the flamboyant supervillains who might have drawn a more reckless, immortal counterpart. The silence where a certain red-suited anomaly should have been resonated most profoundly in the sterile corridors of research facilities like Weapon X, without Wade Wilson's unique genetic makeup, his singular blend of resilience and wit. The program had stumbled, perhaps choosing another, less resilient path, or perhaps fading into a quieter obscurity. Their dark designs, once fueled by the promise of an ultimate weapon, never fully blossomed in this reality. The chaotic spark that might have ignited their most desperate experiments simply never appeared, leaving a more predictable, perhaps even less ambitious, trajectory for clandestine genetic manipulation. This ripple effect extended into the very fabric of the criminal underworld. Without Wade's chaotic presence, some corners of the organized crime syndicates might have found a different, more predictable equilibrium. The scent of aged leather and Vanessa's subtle lavender perfume often filled their quiet evenings, a stark counterpoint to the grit and gunpowder that sometimes clung to Wade's clothes. After a demanding job, he would meticulously clean his favored combat knives, the quiet scrape of steel against a sharpening stone, a rhythmic, almost meditative sound in the stillness. Vanessa, often engrossed in a novel, would occasionally glance up, her eyes soft, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, not of the dangers he faced, but of the peace they had carved out together. Their apartment, a sanctuary high above the city's restless hum, was furnished with sturdy, well-used pieces, each object holding the resonance of their shared history. A chipped mug, a worn chessboard, a stack of dog-eared paperbacks, small anchors in a life that could otherwise be unmoored by its inherent risks. These were the moments when Wade felt the most grounded, the most truly himself, stripped of the bravado and the calculated menace he projected to the world. Here he was simply Wade, a man who loved deeply, fought fiercely, and knew the finite nature of his own strength. The faint ache in his shoulder, an old friend now, served as a constant, gentle reminder of his mortality, a stark contrast to the whispered legends of unbreakable beings. He carried other marks, too, a scar tracing the line of his jaw from a desperate close-quarters encounter, a stiffness in his knee from a long fall that had tested the very limits of his endurance. Yet these physical tolls were not deterrents, but lessons, honing his instincts, refining his tactics. He studied his targets, the criminal networks he dismantled, precision of a surgeon, anticipating every move, every possible outcome. The thrill for him was not in surviving the impossible, but in making the impossible seem routine through sheer, painstaking preparation. His mind, a labyrinth of contingency plans, was his most potent weapon, far more reliable than any enhanced physiology. In this world, the news cycles occasionally buzzed with reports of smaller scale, more human threats, intricate data thefts, high-stakes heists, or the quiet infiltration of corporate espionage rings. The flashy, world-ending catastrophes requiring superpowered intervention seemed to occur less frequently, or were handled by a different roster of heroes, whose powers, while significant, rarely extended to true immortality. There was no Merc with a mouth to punctuate grand pronouncements with a chaotic, fourth-wall-breaking quip. The void left by such an absence was subtle, a quiet ripple rather than a crashing wave. Wade would sometimes catch glimpses of these stories, perhaps on a flickering bar TV, or in the headlines of a discarded newspaper, a faint recognition of a different path that might have been. He wasn't part of that world of capes and cosmic threats. The quiet scrape of steel against the sharpening stone faded into a soft thud as Wade finally laid the honed blade back into its protective sheath. He slipped the sheath into a designated slot within a sturdy, custom-built wooden case. A silent ritual performed countless times. Vanessa, who had been absently tracing patterns on the cover of her dog-eared paperback, looked up, a faint, contented smile playing on her lips. The amber glow from a bedside lamp cast long, gentle shadows across their shared space, highlighting the worn comfort of the antique armchair where Wade often sat. A half-finished crossword puzzle lay abandoned on a small, round table beside her, a testament to the quiet, unfolding evening. Wade leaned back into the armchair, the soft leather creaking faintly in protest, a sound as familiar as the city's distant hum. His gaze drifted to a meticulously organized corkboard on the wall, filled with coded notes, photographs, and map snippets, details of an upcoming contract. These weren't the assignments of grand global intrigue, but precise, often surgical operations against specific, morally reprehensible targets, the kind that society overlooked or was too slow to address. He was a cleaner, a shadow dweller who restored a skewed balance, his mind already meticulously charting routes, analyzing security feeds, and anticipating the labyrinthine movements of his prey. The thought of the task brought a familiar, low thrum of anticipation, but no fear, only the steady pulse of a predator preparing. His physical form, though unenhanced by any extraordinary power, was a testament to years of disciplined training and an innate, brutal efficiency. Every muscle, every sinew was a finely tuned instrument, honed through relentless practice and a deep understanding of human anatomy and combat kinetics. The faint ache in his shoulder, a constant companion, served not as a weakness, but as a perpetual, quiet reminder of limits, of the consequences of a single misstep. He moved with a dancer's grace and a fighter's controlled power, his body a map of earned experience rather than innate invulnerability. This was his strength, his legacy, a body that had faced and overcome countless dangers through sheer, unyielding will and skill. The distant hum of the city, a low, constant lullaby, filtered through the apartment window, a counterpoint to the soft sigh of Vanessa as she finally closed her book. Wade's gaze, previously fixed on the strategic clutter of his corkboard, softened as it found her. She was tracing patterns on the smooth, worn cover of the novel, her brow unfurrowed, a picture of tranquil contentment. The amber light from the bedside lamp seemed to wrap around her, making the quiet contours of her face glow, an anchor in his otherwise tempestuous world. It was this stillness, this shared quiet, that often defined their evenings, a precious sanctuary against the sharp edges of his chosen profession. A faint smile touched Wade's lips, mirroring hers. He shifted slightly in the armchair, the leather whispering beneath him, a sound absorbed by the comforting silence. He found himself not thinking of the targets, not of the complex maneuvers, but of the intricate patterns of light and shadow on the ceiling, cast by the streetlights outside and their own lamp within. These were the moments he fought for, the fragile peace he meticulously protected with every honed blade and every strategic calculation. His life was a delicate balance, a tightly wound spring of danger and calm, and Vanessa was the steady hand that kept it from unraveling. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the gentle sounds of their apartment fill his awareness. The soft rustle of Vanessa turning a page, the distant wail of a siren quickly fading, the subtle creak of the old building settling. He pictured the next mission not as a violent confrontation, but as a series of precise, necessary movements, each one aimed at safeguarding this quiet world he had built. He would navigate the dark alleys and dangerous mines, not for the thrill of the fight, but for the profound tranquility of returning home to this small, warm pocket of peace. This was his chosen path, one walked with a clear mind and a full heart, free from the shadow of desperation. The distant hum of the city, a low, constant lullaby, filtered through the apartment window, a counterpoint to the soft sigh of Vanessa as she finally closed her book. Wade's gaze, previously fixed on the strategic clutter of his corkboard, softened as it found her. she was tracing patterns on the smooth, worn cover of the novel, her brow unfurrowed, a picture of tranquil contentment. The amber light from the bedside lamp seemed to wrap around her, making the quiet contours of her face glow, an anchor in his otherwise tempestuous world. It was this stillness, this shared quiet, that often defined their evenings, a precious sanctuary against the sharp edges of his chosen profession. A faint smile touched Wade's lips, mirroring hers as Vanessa's eyes drifted closed once more. A faint smile still playing on her lips, Wade slowly withdrew his hand. His gaze drifted from her peaceful face to the polished surface of the small, dark wood nightstand beside her. On it, nestled amongst a half-read magazine and a ceramic coaster, lay a slim, meticulously crafted lock-picking set. Its metallic gleam, barely catching the dim light, was a quiet testament to a different part of his life, a reminder of the intricate and delicate operations he performed. It wasn't a jarring contrast, but a soft-edged juxtaposition, a quiet acknowledgement of the two distinct worlds he navigated, both requiring a steady hand and precise touch. The presence of the tools felt less like an intrusion and more like a quiet part of the furniture, a familiar shadow in their domestic calm. Wade's eyes lingered on the tools, not with a surge of adrenaline, but with a settled certainty. His work, though often violent, was never chaotic. He sought targets who had slipped through the cracks, predators preying on the weak, their crimes too intricate or too politically inconvenient for conventional justice. There was a quiet satisfaction in bringing an end to their reign, in restoring a small measure of balance to a world perpetually off-kilter. The thought wasn't a call to action in this moment of peace, but a foundational truth, a silent anchor for his existence. It was the principle that allowed him to protect this quiet, amber-lit sanctuary, to earn these evenings of shared silence with Vanessa. This alternate path, chosen implicitly by a fate that spared him the crucible of cancer, had forged a different kind of protector, one whose quiet vigilance was his most potent weapon. His fingers idly traced the cool metal of a tension wrench, a familiar weight in his hand. Each pick, a slender curve of polished steel, spoke of countless locks opened, secrets uncovered, and pathways silently navigated. It was a language he knew intimately, one of precision and patience, far removed from the blunt force many associated with his line of work. This quiet mastery was a core part of who he was, an intrinsic skill cultivated over years, independent of any catastrophic turn of fate. He carefully placed the wrench back into its velvet-lined slot, the faint metallic clink barely audible. Standing up, he moved with a practiced stillness that belied his profession, his movements fluid and silent as a shadow. He paused by the large window overlooking the city. The muted glow of distant streetlights painting faint streaks across the glass. The city, vast and sprawling below, was a canvas of countless intertwined lives, a place where his own quiet interventions often shaped unseen destinies. The faint, distant sirens were like whispers on the wind, reminders of the chaos he often navigated, not as a brawler or an unstoppable force, but as a ghost in the machine. His contracts were often about precision extraction, the quiet acquisition of sensitive data, or the discreet neutralization of threats before they escalated. There were no flashy explosions or grand pronouncements, just the meticulous execution of a task, leaving barely a ripple in the fabric of the night. This was the life he had chosen, a path forged by skill, not by desperation. Wade turned from the window, the city lights shimmering softly behind him. He moved to a heavy, antique writing desk in a corner of the room, its dark wood scarred by time, polished to a dull sheen. On its surface, neatly arranged, was not the chaos one might expect of a mercenary, but a series of precise tools, small, specialized magnifiers, delicate probes, and a compact, encrypted data pad. He gently pressed a button on the pad, its screen glowing with a faint, almost imperceptible light, revealing complex schematics. His fingers, still recalling the cool metal of the lockpicks, now moved with an equal precision across the data pad's interface. Zooming in on a particularly intricate section of the schematic, it depicted the ventilation system of a sprawling corporate building, its arterial network of ducts and vents detailed with an almost artistic accuracy. This wasn't a job for brute force, but for an almost surgical insertion, a silent infiltration requiring not just skill, but an understanding of the very architecture of a place. He took a slow, deep breath, the subtle scent of old paper and dust from the desk mingling with the faint aroma of the city drifting through the slightly ajar window. His gaze, intense and focused, lingered on a small, almost imperceptible junction point within the digital blueprint. It was a detail others might miss, a weak link in a seemingly impenetrable network, a silent pathway only visible to an expert eye. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, not one of malice, but of quiet satisfaction in deciphering the hidden language of structures and systems. He leaned back slightly, a long, lean shadow stretching across the floor, and for a brief moment, his eyes drifted to a small, framed photo tucked discreetly beside the data pad. A candid shot of Vanessa, laughing, her head thrown back, a stark contrast to the serious work at hand, yet a quiet motivation. Wade's gaze sharp and unblinking, traced the intricate lines of the ventilation system. Each duct, each fan, each pressure sensor was a potential point of entry or a deadly trap without the luxury of regenerative healing. Every misstep wasn't just a setback. It was a permanent injury, a lasting scar, or worse. The glowing screen reflected faintly in his eyes, a cool blue light illuminating the quiet intensity of his focus. He mentally walked through the building, a ghost in the ducts, feeling the cold metal, hearing the hum of distant machinery. This meticulous preparation was his shield, his only true defense against a world that offered no second chances to those who operated in its shadows. He imagined the faint currents of air, the subtle vibrations, understanding that a successful infiltration hinged on becoming as undetectable as a whisper. He slowly exhaled, a long, quiet breath that barely stirred the air. His right hand drifted from the data pad to a small, worn leather pouch beside it. From within, he carefully selected a slender, almost artistic piece of lock-picking steel, its tip gleaming dully in the low light. This wasn't merely a tool. It was an extension of his will, honed by years of practice, each groove and curve familiar to his touch. He rotated it between his fingers, testing its balance, remembering the feel of tumblers yielding under pressure. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through his hand, not of fear, but of the acute awareness of the delicate dance between skill and consequence. The city, a low, thrumming presence beyond his window, seemed to hold its breath with him. With the lock-pick now resting beside the data pad, Wade rose from the desk, his movements fluid and unhurried. He stretched, a slight crackle in his shoulders, a reminder of past exertions, of battles won with grit and tactical foresight rather than invulnerability. He walked to the window, the city sprawling below, now a little clearer. Its distant lights, no longer just streaks, but a shimmering tapestry of human endeavor. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just observing, letting the sheer scale of the urban landscape ground him. The faint scent of rain, carried on a gentle breeze through the barely open window, mixed with the quiet resolve now settling deep within him. Tonight, like many nights, would be about careful steps, silent shadows, and the unforgiving calculus of an unscathed blade, navigating a world designed for the reckless. Wade's fingers, having tested the lock-picking steel, now gently stowed it back in its pouch. His gaze lingered for a moment on the worn leather, a silent acknowledgement of the countless times these tools had been his only allies. He then moved with an almost ethereal quietness to the slightly ajar window, pushing it open just enough to allow his lithe frame to slip through. The cool, damp embrace of the city night air was immediate, a refreshing counterpoint to the quiet intensity of his focus. He began his ascent, scaling the aged brickwork and sturdy fire escape of his apartment building with a practiced grace, each handhold and foot placement deliberate, absolutely silent. Below, the sprawling city lights twinkled like a distant, indifferent cosmos, while ahead, the target, a monolithic corporate tower, loomed, its upper floors glowing with a sterile, almost predatory light. He moved like a phantom across the rooftops, his silhouette merging with the jagged urban skyline, a solitary hunter in a concrete jungle. The metallic tang of the target building's ventilation system was a faint, industrial whisper, a counterpoint to the low, steady hum of machinery emanating from deeper within. Wade navigated the labyrinthine shafts with a practiced ease, his movements fluid and almost liquid, despite the cramped and often dust-laden confines. Sparse shafts of emergency lighting, filtering from distant rooms, occasionally pierced the gloom, illuminating dancing motes of dust before being swallowed again by the shadow. He felt the cold steel beneath his gloved hands, the subtle vibrations of air moving through the vast system, reading the building's very breath. Every inch of progress was deliberate, measured, and hyper-aware of the potential for a misplaced step or an accidental brush that could send a telltale echo through the metal arteries of the structure. His path was a silent testament to years of meticulous training, where stealth was not just a skill, but a vital necessity. He paused at a complex junction of ducts, a faint, almost invisible laser grid shimmering ahead in the dust-filled air. It was a common deterrent, yet always effective for its silent vigilance, without the luxury of regenerative healing to shrug off a minor burn or reset a broken bone. Disarming it required absolute focus, a breath held taut. His fingers, deft and steady, moved with surgical precision to a small, specialized device he pulled from his pouch, a miniature EMP emitter designed to briefly scramble sensitive electronics. A delicate, almost imperceptible click, a barely audible hum, and the grid flickered, then vanished into the ambient gloom. The profound silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by his own quiet, measured breathing, a stark reminder of the permanent, unforgiving consequences that failure would entail in this life without second chances. Following the intricate path of the building's hidden arteries, Wade's senses became extensions of the structure itself. The faint metallic taste in the air, the distant, rhythmic hum of unseen machinery, the subtle shifts in temperature, each detail a fragment of a larger, intricate puzzle. He navigated through a section where the ductwork widened, leading to a large, unbolted access panel that gave way to a service corridor. Light, thin and diffused, seeped in from beneath a door far down the corridor, painting a narrow strip on the polished floor. He settled at the grate, not moving an inch, allowing his eyes to adjust to the deeper shadows within. His breath so shallow it was almost imperceptible. A ghost in the machine. He observed the corridor, noting the placement of an emergency exit, the texture of the walls, and the subtle variations in the floor's sheen, all without a single muscle twitch betraying his presence. The building's heartbeat was slow, deliberate, and for now, entirely unaware of its unseen guest. The information gathered was absorbed without conscious effort, processed with the smooth efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Wade mentally mapped the surrounding areas, identifying potential patrol routes, camera blind spots, and the most discreet way to reach his intended target. The path ahead narrowed once more, guiding him away from the service corridor and deeper into the unknown architecture of the upper floors. He moved with renewed purpose, the rhythmic scritch of his gloved fingers against the dust-moted metal plates the only sound. A subtle counterpoint to the distant, muffled cadence of the city outside. Each movement was a whisper, a fluid ripple through the dark, ensuring no creak, no scrape, no misplaced echo disturbed the quiet sanctity of the building's slumber. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of ozone and heated electronics grew stronger as he approached a specific sector, confirming his trajectory towards his objective. The ventilation shaft gradually tapered into a junction of smaller conduits, leading to an unused utility access panel, perfectly camouflaged against the textured wall of what appeared to be an executive lounge. A sliver of warm, ambient light filtered through the almost invisible seam of the panel, hinting at the plush interiors beyond. Wade paused, his ear pressed against the cool metal, discerning the soft, steady hum of ventilation and the barely there whisper of distant human activity, perhaps a cleaning crew or an early riser. He ran his fingertips along the panel's edge, feeling for the almost imperceptible release catch, his movements slow and deliberate, a testament to years of quiet patience. The air here was still and heavy, carrying a faint, expensive scent of polished wood and old money. This was it, the threshold. He rounded a final bend, the scent of ozone now thick and metallic, and the air shimmered with the heat of countless processors. Before him stretched a control room, a cavern of softly glowing screens and blinking indicator lights. The rhythmic whir of cooling fans filled the space, a low, constant drone that seemed to vibrate in his chest. He took in the layout, rows of sleek consoles, holographic displays casting faint, cool light, and a single, plush chair positioned centrally, currently vacant. Moving with a predator's grace, Wade slipped into the central chair, its synthetic leather still warm from a previous occupant. His gloved fingers danced over the holographic interface, the delicate membranes of light responding to his touch without a sound. He navigated through encrypted firewalls, his eyes tracing lines of code that scrolled endlessly across the ethereal displays. Each keystroke was precise, each access point a mental calculation, a silent dialogue with the network's defenses. As he delved deeper into the system, a single peripheral monitor, usually displaying routine diagnostics, flickered. A faint, almost imperceptible chime resonated, a sound so subtle it might have been imagined. Lost in the constant hum, Wade paused, his fingers hovering over the glowing interface, his gaze unwavering towards the anomaly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by a fraction of a degree. A cold whisper against his cheek, hinting at an unseen change. Wade's focus intensified as lines of code coalesced into tangible schematics on the holographic display. Not financial records, nor surveillance feeds, but intricate blueprints of a highly advanced prototype energy core. The faint hum of the server racks seemed to deepen, a resonant frequency in the quiet control room, as he began systematically siphoning the vast data. Each file transfer was silent, a delicate thread of information pulled from the network's core. As the data download progressed, a secondary, smaller data stream caught his attention, a peripheral log, tucked away in an obscure subdirectory. It wasn't directly related to the energy core, but contained fragmented, encrypted communications referencing Project Chimera and enhanced gene therapy trials. The names were vague, yet a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of recognition crossed Wade's face, quickly dismissed as he refocused on his primary objective. The final byte transferred, Wade smoothly disengaged from the network, the ethereal displays dissolving into inert panels. He rose from the chair, the warm indent of his presence slowly fading, leaving no trace. A light breeze from a barely open vent rustled a loose cable, the only sound betraying the recent flurry of activity. He moved towards a subtle, unmarked exit, the metallic scent of ozone now receding, leaving behind only the quiet hum of the building's internal systems. The last byte of data clicked into place, the holographic interface dissolving silently at Wade's command. The intricate schematics of the energy core vanished, replaced by the blank, cool light of the console. He lingered for a moment, his gaze drifting back to the directory where Project Chimera lay hidden. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor of unease stirred within him, a fleeting premonition of darker things coiled beneath the surface of this corporate heist. He pushed it aside, his mission accomplished. With a silent grace that belied his powerful build, he rose from the chair, the synthetic leather sighing softly as it released his weight. His boots made no sound on the polished industrial floor as he navigated the maze of service tunnels and utility conduits. Each turn was instinctual, a dance of shadows and calculated movements learned over years of precision work. He moved like a phantom, a ghost in the machine, his heightened senses tracking every shift in air pressure, every distant clatter. This was his element, the quiet, methodical execution of a contract, relying on honed skill and sharp intellect rather than brute force or invincibility. A faint, almost nostalgic smile touched his lips at the thought. The stakes were always real, the consequences tangible. Emerging onto a rain-slicked rooftop, the vast urban sprawl stretched before him, a tapestry of shimmering lights under a bruised, cloud-heavy sky. The wind, cool and clean, carried the distant hum of the city, a lullaby of industry and sleeping lives. He stood for a moment, letting the subtle spray of rain wash over his face, a grounding sensation after the sterile intensity of the facility. The encrypted drive, now safely tucked away, held secrets that would soon disrupt powerful circles. But it was the other, smaller data stream, the one about Project Chimera, that truly lingered. It was a faint, unsettling hum beneath the surface of his thoughts, a whisper of a world he didn't quite belong to, a path he had somehow, unknowingly, avoided. He secured his grapple, preparing for the silent descent into the labyrinthine streets below. Another successful night concluded, another shadow fading into the dawn. The labyrinthine service tunnels eventually yielded to a final heavy door, which Wade nudged open with practiced ease. A cool, damp breath of city air greeted him, carrying the faint scent of rain and distant exhaust. He stepped out into a narrow alley, the slick asphalt reflecting the muted amber glow of a distant street lamp, a stark contrast to the sterile gleam of the facility he'd just departed. The quiet patter of residual rain against concrete was the only sound, a gentle rhythm to punctuate his silent departure. His eyes scanned the deserted alley with the same efficient precision he applied to every environment. A nondescript, dark-paneled sports coupe sat idling quietly a few yards away, its engine a barely audible hum. He slipped into the driver's seat, the supple leather cool beneath his touch, and the door closed with a soft, confident thud. As he turned the key, the subtle thought of Project Chimera flickered again, a whisper of an unsolved puzzle in the quiet hum of the engine, quickly dissolving into the rhythm of the vehicle. The car pulled away from the curb, its tires whispering softly on the wet pavement. The city unfolded around him, a tapestry of rain-streaked glass and diffused light, each skyscraper a silent sentinel against the indigo sky. He drove with a quiet focus, navigating the familiar routes without conscious thought, his mind already drifting towards the comfortable solitude of his apartment, and perhaps the gentle anticipation of a quiet morning. The night's work was done, the ledger balanced, leaving only the tranquil hum of the engine and the soft glow of the dashboard lights for company. The sports coupe glided through the pre-dawn streets, its engine a hushed purr that seemed to cradle the quiet city. Wade's hands, devoid of the scars and mottled skin that would later define another version of him, gripped the steering wheel with practiced ease. His gaze, sharp and observant, flickered across the rearview mirror, checking for any lingering shadows, any unexpected pursuit. The mission was complete, clean, and efficient, just like every other. There was a quiet satisfaction in a job executed with such precision, a rhythm to the life he'd chosen that few understood. He was good at this, truly excellent, a professional in a world that often demanded messy ends. The faint hint of morning mist began to soften the hard edges of the buildings, promising a new day and a respite from the night's demands. He parked the car in a discreet underground garage, the hum of the engine finally dying down to an echoing silence. The chill of the concrete embraced him as he exited the vehicle, the scent of damp earth and oil, a familiar perfume. A private elevator, its polished steel reflecting his silhouette, whisked him upwards to a quiet, unassuming apartment building. The city's distant murmur was now muted, a mere whisper against the thick walls as he unlocked his apartment door. The warmth inside, a blend of worn leather and freshly brewed coffee, offered a stark contrast to the sterile efficiency of his work. A small, vibrant orchid on the living room table, carefully tended, hinted at a softer side to the man who moved through shadows. He slipped off his jacket, unwinding from the night, a quiet anticipation blooming within him. A soft melody, barely audible from the next room, signaled her presence. Vanessa. Her artistic touch, her vibrant energy, had infused this space with life, softening the edges of his own disciplined existence. He moved towards the sound, a genuine smile gracing his lips, a rare sight for those who only knew the detached mercenary. He paused at the doorway, watching her, lost in the focused concentration of her painting. The scent of turpentine mingled pleasantly with her subtle perfume. Wade stepped further into the apartment, the subtle scent of citrus and a faint warmth from the heating system embracing him. He moved with a quiet economy of motion, heading directly for the small, well-stocked kitchen. The ceramic mug, warm from the last brew, was quickly refilled, the rich aroma of dark roast filling the air. He leaned against the counter, sipping slowly, his eyes idly tracing the intricate patterns of condensation on the window pane, beyond which the city slowly began to lighten from deepest indigo to soft gray. This was his sanctuary, a quiet retreat from the sharp edges of his professional life, a place where the weight of responsibility could be temporarily shed. The precision of his movements reflected a life of calculated risk and careful planning. Even in moments of calm, he moved from the kitchen to the living area, his footsteps silent on the plush rug. The vibrant orchid on the polished dark wood table drew his eye, its petals a splash of audacious color against the muted tones of the room. He gently touched one of the velvety leaves, a flicker of a soft smile playing on his lips. This small act of tending, of nurturing something delicate and beautiful, was a private ritual, a counterbalance to the often brutal realities he navigated. It was a testament to the capacity for tenderness that lay beneath the surface of the efficient, detached operative. A hint of the life he cultivated away from the watchful eyes of the world. The early morning light, now a pale silver, began to filter through the blinds, casting long, soft shadows across the floor. A faint stiffness in his shoulder, a familiar echo of a strenuous maneuver from the night's work, prompted him to stretch slowly, methodically. He rolled his neck, feeling the slight tension release, a testament to a body honed by rigorous training and constant vigilance, but ultimately a mortal one. There was no miraculous regeneration, no instant recovery from the bumps and bruises of his dangerous profession. Each ache, each minor strain was a reminder of his humanity, a silent tally of the risks he embraced. He paused, looking out at the city, now fully bathed in the soft glow of a true dawn. A vast, complex tapestry of lives unfolding. A world he navigated with unmatched skill, yet with the fundamental vulnerability of any man. This quiet moment of self-assessment was part of his discipline, acknowledging limits even as he pushed against them. The apartment's quiet stillness was broken only by the soft rustle of pages, as Wade retrieved a worn, leather-bound journal from a clever hollow within a bookshelf, its cover smooth from years of handling, opened to reveal neat, precise entries of past assignments, coded names, and the subtle details he'd learned to observe. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of old paper and the metallic tang of gunpowder lingered within its leaves, a familiar aroma that spoke of a life lived on the razor's edge. He paused on a fresh, blank page, pen poised. The day's first quiet thought already forming in his mind, ready to become another indelible mark. His gaze, momentarily detached from the journal, drifted to a framed photograph on a nearby side table. It was a simple, candid shot, capturing a fleeting moment of pure, unadulterated joy. A woman with bright, intelligent eyes and a mischievous smile laughed effortlessly, her arm linked through his, a silent testament to shared happiness. Vanessa, her vibrant presence, even captured in still image, brought a soft glow to the muted tones of his mornings, a quiet promise of warmth that settled deep within the corners of his solitary world. With a quiet, almost imperceptible sigh, he closed the leather-bound journal, returning it to its hidden nook with practiced ease. The pen was carefully set beside it, the ceramic mug rinsed and placed neatly in the sink. Small rituals of order outside his window, the city began to truly awaken. Its distant hum, a slow, rising chorus that blended with the gentle, rhythmic tick of the antique grandfather clock in the hall. For now, the world of contracts and shadows was held at bay. A peaceful interlude unfolding before the day's inevitable demands would call him away. His gaze, momentarily detached from the journal, drifted to a framed photograph on a nearby side table. It was a simple, candid shot, capturing a fleeting moment of pure, unadulterated joy. A woman with bright, intelligent eyes and a mischievous smile laughed effortlessly, her arm linked through his, a silent testament to shared happiness. Vanessa, her vibrant presence, even captured in still image, brought a soft glow to the muted tones of his mornings, a quiet promise of warmth that settled deep within the corners of his solitary world. Wade's fingertips, calloused from years of handling weapons, gently traced the cool glass over Vanessa's image. Drawing his gaze back from the photograph, Wade returned to the worn, leather-bound journal. The pen, a simple, functional instrument, was poised once more. With a quiet inhale, he began to write, the soft, rhythmic scratch of ink on paper filling the stillness. His entry wasn't a rambling confession, but a methodical recount. Coded details from a recent information retrieval, observed patterns in a target security detail, a preliminary tactical outline for a potential extraction. His handwriting, surprisingly neat for a man of his profession, filled the page with precise, almost architectural clarity. Each stroke was a deliberate act of memory and planning, a silent conversation between his experience and the blank page. The apartment, though seemingly stark, was a testament to this organized mind. Every tool, every piece of gear, held its designated place, a reflection of the mental order he imposed on his dangerous world. The ink settled, marking the completion of the day's first strategic entry. With a soft, almost imperceptible click, Wade closed the journal. The faint thud of the cover echoed briefly in the room, a punctuation mark at the end of his private ritual. Outside, the city was slowly stirring to life, a distant hum of traffic gradually replacing the early morning quiet. He glanced at his reflection in the polished surface of the journal cover, a face unmarred by the grotesque scars of another timeline, a capable visage showing the subtle lines of experience, but still possessing a quiet intensity, not the jester of chaos, but a man of calculated action, his future still unwritten, still whole. Wade placed the pen down, the final word settling quietly onto the page. He closed the leather journal with a soft thud, a quiet period to his thoughts. His eyes then lifted, drawn across the organized room to a large, framed map of the city that dominated a section of the wall. Tiny, almost invisible pins dotted various locations, some clustered, some isolated, each marking a point of interest or a past endeavor. He rose from the desk, his movements fluid and economical, and crossed the short distance to the map. The map wasn't just decorative. It was a living document of his complex world, a silent ledger of opportunities and risks. His fingers, still bearing the faint scent of ink, hovered over a specific cluster of pins in a lesser-known industrial district, a region recently buzzing with hushed whispers of illicit dealings. This particular sector had been under his quiet observation for weeks, its low-key activity hinting at a substantial, yet well-concealed operation. Without the brash invulnerability that would one day define another version of him, Wade relied solely on meticulous preparation and a deep understanding of human weakness. Each pin represented a fragment of intelligence, a watchful eye. His fingers, still faintly scented with ink from his journal, brushed against the textured surface of the map, tracing a specific route leading deep into the district's heart. He visualized the layout, the shadows that would lengthen with the moon's descent, the quiet hum of distant machinery that would mask his approach. A small, almost imperceptible shift in his posture indicated a mental blueprint forming, precise and unyielding. With the mental path secured, Wade turned from the map, his gaze now directed towards a low, secured cabinet along the adjacent wall. The faint click as he unlocked it was swallowed by the room's quiet. Inside, a collection of tools, each meticulously arranged, gleamed softly under the dim light, awaiting selection for the night's intricate work. He reached for a slender, specialized fiber optic scope, its cool metal smooth beneath his touch. Soon, the apartment was empty, a silent testament to a life lived in shadows. Wade moved through the quiet city streets, the worn leather of his boots making barely a whisper on the damp pavement. The cool night air carried the faint, metallic tang of the industrial zone he approached, a subtle promise of the challenging work awaiting his unsung skills under the sprawling, indifferent urban sky. The fiber optic scope, a silent eye, was joined by a series of other instruments. Wade's fingers moved with the practiced grace of a surgeon, selecting small, specialized picks from a velvet-lined tray, each designed for a different type of lock or secure entry point. He chose a slim, weighted grappling hook, its cable a whisper-thin polymer designed for silent ascent. A low-profile comlink, perfectly molded to fit behind the ear, was next, its matte black surface absorbing the room's dim light. Each item was inspected with a brief, discerning glance before being placed into a compartmentalized utility belt. A silent symphony of preparation unfolding in the stillness of the night. His breath was even, his focus absolute, every movement a testament to years of self-discipline and honed craft. Next, a pair of lightweight, sound-dampening boots, reinforced yet flexible, were retrieved from a compartment below the cabinet. Wade sat on a low, padded bench, pulling them on with unhurried movements, the soft rustle of their material barely audible. He laced them tight, ensuring a perfect fit, his mind already mapping out the complex terrain of the industrial district. From a deeper recess, he pulled out a dark, form-fitting suit made of a durable, breathable fabric that offered both concealment and freedom of movement. It wasn't the flamboyant uniform of a superhero, but the practical attire of a ghost, designed to blend into the urban night. As he donned it, the room grew quieter still, as if the very air held its breath in anticipation of his departure. With the final clasp secured, Wade rose, a shadow coalescing from the deeper shadows of the room. He moved to the tall window that overlooked the sleeping city, a panorama of muted streetlights and distant, twinkling towers. The industrial district, his destination, was a darker mass on the horizon, a labyrinth of brick and steel waiting for his careful navigation. This was his domain, not through explosive power or regenerative defiance, but through sheer wit, impeccable skill, and an almost supernatural understanding of human nature and urban terrain. He paused, a moment of silent contemplation, before turning away from the window, his gaze now sharpened, entirely focused on the intricate dance of the night ahead. The city breathed around him, unaware of the precise, human instrument about to move within its hidden gears. After securing the suit, Wade ran a hand over the smooth, dark fabric, a final check for any loose ends. His reflection in a nearby darkened window showed a silhouette, sharp and undefined against the room's soft, ambient glow. He moved with silent purpose towards a heavy, unassuming door, its surface plain and devoid of markings, blending perfectly with the surrounding wall paneling. The door opened with a near-silent hiss, revealing a sliver of the cool night air outside. Wade stepped through, pulling the door shut behind him as effortlessly as it had opened, the sound-dampening mechanics doing their work. He emerged onto a secluded rooftop, the city sprawling beneath him like a sleeping giant, its distant hum a gentle lullaby. With a practiced ease, Wade moved to the edge of the rooftop, his silhouette briefly framed against the soft glow of a distant high-rise. He selected a secure anchor point, testing its strength with a subtle tug before unwinding the whisper-thin polymer cable of his grappling hook. The city below remained undisturbed, oblivious to the silent hunter beginning his descent into its depths. His eyes, keen and practiced, scanned the city's expanse, settling upon the maze of metal and concrete that was the industrial district. His gaze moved slowly, deliberately, tracing invisible lines across rooftops and alleyways, mapping out the shadows that would serve as his pathways. He noted the rhythmic pulses of distant machinery, a subtle reminder of the life he moved through, yet remained apart from, a silent observer in the heart of the urban sprawl. With a quiet grace born of countless nights spent traversing urban landscapes, Wade approached the edge of the roof. He paused, a momentary silhouette against the faint glow of the city, before executing a practiced descent. His movements were fluid, each handhold and foot placement precise, allowing him to melt into the vertical shadows of the building, a ghost fading from view, leaving no trace behind. The descent brought him to a lesser-used service alley, where the smell of damp concrete and faint machine oil hung heavy in the cool air. He moved through it with silent intent, his boots making no sound on the grimy pavement. Ahead, a chain-link fence, topped with glinting razor wire, marked the perimeter of his target area. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his posture indicated he had already found the weak point, a familiar challenge in his line of work. Wade navigated the labyrinthine lower pathways, the city's whispers replaced by the faint drip of condensation from unseen pipes. He moved with an almost ethereal grace, his senses attuned to the subtle shifts in air current and the distant echoes of activity. Each step was calculated, each shadow embraced, as he drew closer to the heart of the industrial district, a place of rust and forgotten promises, a dilapidated fire escape, its metal groaning softly in the breeze, offered his next ascent. He scaled it with effortless strength, his movements fluid and precise, a silent phantom against the backdrop of grimy brick and distant, pulsating neon. The air grew cooler, carrying the metallic scent of industry as he reached a higher vantage point, a perch overlooking his target, a nondescript warehouse. From the cover of a shadowed ledge, Wade surveyed the warehouse's perimeter. His gaze was steady, discerning the rhythm of its security, the subtle hum of ventilation, the precise location of every vulnerability. There was no theatricality, no spoken internal monologue, just the quiet, focused intensity of a man who relied solely on his honed instincts and mortal frame to survive. The night held its breath, waiting for his next move. From his perch, Wade's gaze drifted across the warehouse roof, noting the weathered vents and the subtle sheen of moonlit grime. A faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated from within, a sleeping beast of forgotten machinery. Its rhythm, a deep, slow pulse against the quiet night. With a practiced ease, Wade unclipped a small, sleek device from his belt, its metallic surface reflecting the distant neon with a faint shimmer. His fingers, agile and precise, adjusted its settings, a silent prelude to the task ahead, each movement economical and deliberate. A barely audible click, and a section of the grimy skylight above the warehouse yielded with a soft sigh of ancient metal. Wade slipped through the narrow opening, his descent controlled and soundless, into the cool, still air of the vast interior, where dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of moonlight filtering from above. The device, now humming almost imperceptibly, clung to the cold metal of a ventilation shaft. Wade's gloved fingers made swift, practiced adjustments, the soft clicks barely audible in the night's embrace. He then turned his attention to a less visible seam in the structure, a service hatch almost swallowed by shadows, its rust-pitted surface promising a silent entrance. With a gentle yet firm pressure, he tested its integrity, his body a coiled spring of controlled energy, ready for the next precise move. Fading from silhouette into shadow, the hatch gave way with a soft sigh of protesting metal, revealing a confined, dust-laden crawlspace. Wade slipped through like a whisper, his form momentarily lost in the deeper gloom, before re-emerging into the cavernous main hall of the warehouse. The air inside was still and heavy, carrying the faint, metallic scent of disused machinery and the ghosts of past industry. Towering shelves, laden with indistinct shrouded shapes, stretched into the shadowy ceiling, like silent sentinels guarding forgotten secrets, their presence a palpable weight in the quiet space. His gaze swept across the expansive floor, discerning the subtle topography of the industrial space. In the furthest corner, bathed in the faint, distant glow of a single grimy skylight, stood a collection of archaic server racks, wires thick as anacondas, coiled from them, disappearing into the concrete floor. A low, rhythmic thrum, the source of the earlier hum, emanated from this nerve center, a pulse in the otherwise inert structure, hinting at the digital heart of the operation, its quiet rhythm a counterpoint to the still air. Wade navigated the labyrinthine aisles, his boots making no sound on the dusty concrete floor, a ghost among the shrouded giants. The air, heavy with the quiet breath of disuse, seemed to absorb even the faintest rustle of his movements. He moved with an almost preternatural grace, his eyes dark and sharp, cutting through the gloom, deciphering the silent language of shadows. Each step was a calculated silence, a precise placement of weight, as if the floor itself was a fragile membrane that might betray his presence. The vastness of the hall, filled with the looming, indistinct forms, offered both cover and a profound sense of isolation. A subtle shift in air pressure, a barely perceptible current, hinted at an unseen opening or a ventilation system stirring to life in some distant part of the structure, drawing him deeper into the heart of the dormant facility. Guided by the subtle hum that had initially drawn his attention, Wade moved deeper, past a row of archaic, tarp-draped machinery that looked like slumbering beasts from a bygone era. The air grew faintly cooler here, carrying a crisp, almost sterile scent, a stark contrast to the dust and old metal. He found himself at the entrance to a smaller, more contained section of the warehouse, partitioned by temporary walls of corrugated steel. A dim, almost imperceptible blue light flickered from within, spilling a faint, cool glow onto the floor, illuminating a patch of concrete that looked unnaturally clean. This area felt different, active, a nerve center hidden within the old shell, a clear sign he was close to his objective. His senses, honed by years of navigating hostile environments, registered the almost silent whir of a hidden camera, subtly camouflaged above the entrance. He noted the precise angle, the sweep of its unseen gaze, and the faint, almost rhythmic blinking of a tiny indicator light, a pulse of silent vigilance. His hand, slow and deliberate, drifted to a small, intricate device on his belt, its surface cool against his gloved palm. There was no regenerative factor to shrug off a misstep here, no healing factor to mend a broken bone or a gunshot wound. Every action, every decision had to be precise, flawless. The blue light ahead beckoned, a quiet challenge demanding not a brute force assault, but a dance of pure, unadulterated skill and unyielding focus, a test of the unscathed blade he had become. Wade pushed through a heavy, insulated door that glided open silently, revealing a starkly different environment. The cool blue light intensified, emanating from overhead panels recessed into a low ceiling, casting long, crisp shadows. This was clearly a laboratory, not a storage hall. Gleaming metal surfaces, banks of humming computer terminals displaying scrolling lines of data, and tall, cylindrical tubes filled with a faintly swirling viscous liquid lined the walls. The air here was not just cool, but deliberately chilled with a faint metallic tang. A profound quiet permeated the space, broken only by the soft whir of machinery and the distant, rhythmic drip of an unknown liquid. His eyes, accustomed to deciphering patterns in chaos, quickly processed the information on the screen. It wasn't just general biology. The schematics delved into accelerated cellular regeneration and enhanced physiological resilience, concepts disturbingly close to the very projects he had heard whispers of in the underworld. A series of numbered experiments, each with a subject designation rather than a name, flashed across a secondary monitor. He noted the chilling consistency in the genetic markers, a recurring pattern that suggested a singular, ambitious goal, the creation of super soldiers, a twisted echo of forgotten wartime ambitions. The air grew heavier with the weight of this revelation, transforming the sterile quiet into something more ominous. A soft chime from a nearby terminal drew his attention. A new data stream began to scroll, detailing Project Chimera, an ongoing initiative. The name sent a shiver down his spine, recalling hushed tales of individuals pushed beyond their limits, stripped of their former selves. The data listed various experimental subjects, their unique physiologies cataloged with clinical detachment. His gaze settled on a file marked Subject Delta-7, the most recent entry featuring blurred images of a gaunt, powerful figure, their body racked with visible trauma, yet still showing signs of accelerated healing. It was clear that Weapon X, in this alternate reality, had found another path, another candidate to sacrifice. Their relentless pursuit of human enhancement continuing unabated, leaving Wade to ponder the cruel irony of his own unscathed existence. The chilling consistency in the genetic markers, a recurring pattern across subjects, hinted at a singular, ambitious goal: the creation of super soldiers. Wade's gaze drifted from the abstract genetic sequences to a log of Project Chimera on another screen, detailing experimental trials with increasingly aggressive parameters. The air grew heavier with the weight of this revelation, transforming the sterile quiet into something more ominous. he noticed a faint, almost invisible, mist rising from the cooling vents near the floor. A subtle sign of the extreme temperatures required to maintain such a facility, and perhaps the stability of its volatile contents. A soft, rhythmic pulsing of light drew his attention to the tall, cylindrical tubes that lined the far wall. They weren't just filled with liquid. Faint human-like forms were suspended within, shimmering faintly as if breathing. These were the subjects, not just data points on a screen, but living, developing entities. Each tube was connected by a mesh of clear tubing, circulating the viscous liquid and pulsing with that same low blue light. The air, already metallic, now carried a faint, almost clinical scent of chemicals, underscoring the grim reality of the experiments taking place. One of the monitors beside a particularly large tube displayed a progress bar, stalled at 98%, and beneath it, a designation. Subject Alpha-1, status dormant. This wasn't merely a research facility. It was an active incubation site for something profoundly dangerous. The systematic nature of it all, the cold efficiency, suggested not just a program, but an organization with vast resources and a terrifying singular vision. Wade felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't just another contract. This was a direct line to something much bigger, something that could reshape the entire world if unleashed. Wade moved with the silent grace of a predator, his eyes now fixed on the suspended forms, a peculiar blend of professional detachment and nascent unease settling within him. He noted the subtle nuances, the varying ages of the subjects, some appearing as young adults, others more mature, the almost imperceptible undulations of the viscous liquid, the way the low blue light cast long, flickering shadows from their closed eyelids across their unnervingly placid faces. The sterile quiet of the facility was never truly absolute. A faint, rhythmic hum of unseen machinery resonated through the floor and walls, a constant mechanical whisper beneath the surface of his awareness, a testament to the immense power maintaining this grim spectacle. As his gaze drifted along the line of these chilling exhibits, one particular tube caught his attention. It was slightly recessed, its surface scratched as if by long-forgotten tools, and bore a fading, hand-written label clinging precariously next to its sleek digital identifier. The inscription wasn't a name, but a series of archaic alphanumeric codes, strangely familiar. They echoed fragments from a data heist years ago, a black market acquisition that had hinted at deeply buried government projects, a web of shadowy operations he'd quickly dismissed as too far-fetched for even his cynical tastes. The recognition was a slow, creeping chill, a mental puzzle piece clicking into place, rather than a sudden jolt. He leaned closer, the faint, clinical chemical scent intensifying, subtly different from the sterile air, hinting at the preservation fluids. At the very base of the cylinder, almost imperceptibly etched into the polished metal, was a symbol he knew, a stylized X, angular and stark, barely visible unless the light caught it just right. It was a mark he had encountered only in the periphery of his underworld dealings, whispered about in hushed tones, often associated with contracts that simply vanished, or individuals who disappeared without a trace. This was no longer just an experiment or a series of numbered subjects. It was a vast, sprawling operation, a terrifying institution that had been lurking closer to the edges of his world than he could have ever conceived. The archaic alphanumeric codes, once a forgotten flicker in his memory, coalesced into a sharp recollection. He remembered the specific data packet, a discarded scrap from a high-stakes corporate espionage job targeting a defunct pharmaceutical giant. It had detailed early, wildly unethical human trials, codenamed Project Chimera, focused on accelerated cellular regeneration. At the time, Wade had dismissed it as sensationalized fiction, another government boogeyman story too extreme to be real. Now, observing these silent, suspended forms, the metallic hum of the unseen machinery seemed to grow slightly more insistent, a low thrum resonating not just through the floor, but through his very bones, vibrating with an undeniable, grim reality. His focus sharpened on the specific tube with the scratched label. Inside, the suspended figure was unmistakably a man, his physique lean but muscular. A faint, almost artistic scar tracing a path from his collarbone to his sternum. Wade had seen similar, though never identical, patterns in his line of work. The telltale signs of crude, experimental surgical interventions, often attempts to install or remove augmentations. The clinical chemical scent in the air intensified, its sharp, sterile tang now laced with a subtle hint of copper, reminiscent of fresh blood. A phantom sensation that prickled at the back of his throat. This wasn't just a forgotten project. It was a foundational brick in a far larger, more insidious structure. The archaic codes represented not just Project Chimera, but a series of incremental, barbaric steps towards something more potent, more controlled. He deduced that these were earlier, cruder attempts at inducing and manipulating physiological anomalies, a dark evolutionary path leading to the very purpose of this hidden facility. A cold, heavy certainty settled over him. This was a precursor, a failed, forgotten iteration of a process that, in some unseen corner of the world, might have succeeded, unknowingly charting the course for lives, including his own, in ways he was only now beginning to comprehend. The quiet hum of the facility seemed to hold a million untold secrets